My husband looked me in the eye and called his assistant's pregnancy a work accident. He told me to grow up and accept it if I wanted to keep our marriage. I nodded and said yes. He thought he had silenced a broken wife. He had no idea he just handed me the shovel to bury his career, his reputation, and the dirty secret he thought would die with that baby. My name is Lauren Hayes, and at 33 years old, I thought I understood how user experience worked. You map out the journey, you anticipate the pain points, and you design a solution. But standing in the center of our 2-bedroom apartment in Riverton at 2 in the morning, staring at my husband, I realized I had been looking at the wrong data set for 7 years. Ethan Miller, the 35-year-old account director who I had vowed to love in sickness and in health, was currently pacing our living room floor like a caged tiger. He had just detonated a nuclear bomb in the middle of our marriage, and he was annoyed that I was taking too long to sweep up the radioactive ash. It was a work accident. Lauren, Ethan said, running a hand through his perfectly gelled hair. Ruby is young. She was overwhelmed. We were working late on the Deltora account, and things just blurred. You need to grow up and look at the big picture here. I stood frozen near the kitchen island. Ruby Collins, his 26-year-old assistant, the one with the bubbly laugh he had mentioned a dozen times over the last 6 months. A work accident. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, scratching against my throat. She is pregnant. Ethan. That is not a spilled coffee. Are you asking for a divorce? Are you leaving me for her? Ethan stopped pacing. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and disdain that made my stomach turn. Don't be dramatic, he snapped. If you were truly a woman who believed in family, you would understand. This is a mess? Yes, but it is part of the package now. I need you to stand behind me. I need you to help me fix the optics of this, not fall apart like a teenager. You want me to help you raise your mistress's child? I asked, the absurdity of it acting like a physical blow. He stepped closer, his face twisting into a sneer I had never seen before. It was ugly. Maybe if you hadn't been so unavailable lately, this wouldn't have happened. He spat out. You are dry. Lauren, you are clinical. Looking at you lately, it makes me feel nothing. I won't touch you anymore. You kill my mood. Maybe if you could actually get pregnant, I wouldn't have slipped up with Ruby. She makes me feel alive. The air left the room. He had used our infertility struggle, the years of negative tests, the tears, the prayers as the justification for his betrayal. So accept it, he continued, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper, or get the hell out of my life before you ruin everything I have built. I waited for the scream. I waited for the sob that would shatter my ribs. But it never came. Instead, a strange, sterile silence washed over my brain. It was the feeling of a system rebooting in safe mode. I looked at Ethan, but I no longer saw my husband. I saw a variable, a glitch in the code, a subject that needed to be isolated and neutralized. I straightened my spine. My hands stopped shaking. Okay, I said. Ethan blinked, thrown off balance by the sudden lack of resistance. Okay, you want me to accept this? I looked him dead in the eye. I will accept it. On my own terms. He frowned, not liking the tone, but unable to pinpoint why. He checked his watch, dismissing me. Good. I'm going to stay at a friend's place for a few days. Let things cool down here. And Lauren, don't do anything stupid with my staff. Do not embarrass me. He grabbed his keys and stormed out. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed off the walls. I sat down at the dining table. The roast chicken I had made for dinner sat in the center, cold and congealed. I stared at it for a long moment. My eyes were dry. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. I reached for my laptop bag. I did not open my social media to cry to my friends. I did not search for marriage counselors. I opened a fresh document. I typed the first header checklist. Underneath, I began to type 1 divorce lawyer, 2 forensic accountant, 3 asset preservation, 4 the truth about Ruby's pregnancy. Ethan thought he had silenced me with his cruelty. He thought the baby was his shield. He had no idea that he had just handed me the very weapon I would use to dismantle his entire life, piece by piece. The silence in the apartment was heavy, but the ghosts of who we used to be were louder. As I sat there in the dim light of the dining room, I could not help but replay the reel of the last 7 years. It was not always slammed doors and cruel insults about my body. If it had been, leaving would have been easy. The tragedy was that we had been happy, disgustingly, beautifully happy. I closed my eyes and I was back at Harbor's Corner, that greasy spoon diner on the edge of Riverton where the coffee always tasted slightly burnt. We used to go there after jogging around the lake on Saturday mornings. I could see Ethan's face, flushed from the run, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he eyed the last blueberry pancake on the shared plate. You wouldn't dare take that last bite. He would tease, his fork hovering like a weapon. I ran an extra mile for that. Lauren, have some mercy. Mercy is for the weak, Miller. I would laugh, stabbing the pancake before he could react. He was so funny back then. He had this way of making the mundane feel like an adventure. I remembered the time we sat in a fast food joint, and he started sketching on a napkin with a cheap blue pen. He drew a ridiculous, lopsided crest with a cat and a spatula, declaring it the official logo of Miller Hayes Incorporated. "We are going to take over the world, Lao," he had said, grinning over his fries. "Just you wait." We moved into our first apartment with nothing but secondhand furniture and that napkin framed on the wall. The sofa smelled like dust and the radiator clanked all night. But Ethan treated it like a palace. He spent hours drilling holes to hang my art, while I drew a timeline of our future on a large whiteboard. Buy a house, Europe trip, start a family. That last one, start a family. The memory shifted, darker now, but still filled with his warmth. I thought about the fertility clinic, the smell of antiseptic, the cold stirrups, the crushing weight of another negative result. I remembered sitting in the car afterwards, sobbing until I could barely breathe. Ethan had grabbed my hand, squeezing it so hard his knuckles turned white. "Hey, look at me," he had whispered, wiping a tear from my cheek. "If it doesn't happen, we just travel. Okay, we will be the cool aunt and uncle who go to Bali and send weird postcards. We will be free to go anywhere. Just you and me. That is enough for me. Lauren, you are enough." I clung to that memory. I clung to the image of us on that cross-country road trip 2 years ago, windows down, Ethan screaming the wrong lyrics to an 80s power ballad while mustard from his burger dripped onto his favorite white shirt. I had filmed it, shaking with laughter as he tried to wipe it off and keep driving. We were a team. We were partners against the world. That was the problem. That was why I was still sitting here at 3 in the morning instead of packing my bags years ago. I had fallen in love with a version of Ethan that I thought was the permanent reality. I believed in the man who panicked and made me soup when I coughed once. I believed in the man who held me through the grief of my empty womb. But that man was gone. Or maybe he never existed. The contrast made me nauseous. The man who once said "you are enough" was the same man who stood in this room an hour ago and told me I was dry and unappealing. The man who joked about our freedom was now calling my pain drama. I looked at the empty chair across the table. A chilling realization settled over me. The shock was not just the affair. It was not just the baby. It was the weapon he chose. He took the most painful, vulnerable struggle of our lives, our battle with infertility, and sharpened it into a blade to cut me deep. He turned our tragedy into my failure. If he can do that, I whispered to the empty room. Then who have I been sleeping next to? If he could twist the narrative from we are in this together to you are broken, so I had to look elsewhere. Then what else was a lie? How much of our marriage was just a script he was writing until something better came along? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the sleeping city of Riverton. The nostalgia was fading, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I was done mourning the man he used to be. It was time to deal with the man he actually was. The erosion of our marriage did not happen with a bang, but with a slow, suffocating leak. It started with the clock. Ethan began coming home later and later, pushing 7 o'clock to 9, and then 9 to midnight. At first, the excuses were standard client emergencies, pitch decks that needed last-minute revisions. Then, the narrative shifted. He told me he had taken on a serious mentorship role. There is this new girl, Ruby. He had told me months ago, fixing his tie in the hallway mirror without meeting my eyes. She is really sharp. Lauren, very hard-working. She just needs an old hand to show her the ropes. It feels good to pass on the knowledge. I remembered smiling at him, feeling a surge of vicarious pride. I thought he was being a generous leader. I had no idea I was applauding the introduction of my replacement. Then came the physical transformation. Ethan, who used to be content with wrinkled department store polos, suddenly upgraded his entire wardrobe. He came home with crisp, tailored shirts and a bottle of cologne that cost $300 a cent, far muskier than anything he had ever worn for me. He joined a high-end gym chain, the kind with eucalyptus towels and juice bars, and went religiously 4 times a week. Advertising is a shark tank, he said defensively when I raised an eyebrow at his 3rd gym session in a row. You have to look the part to sell the part. Don't start nitpicking my appearance. Lauren, our shared dinners evaporated. He was always eating out with the team, leaving me alone at our dining table. I spent my evenings in front of my laptop, chewing on cold leftovers while analyzing user interface data for Northgate Creative, trying to ignore the empty seat across from me. Then he stopped coming to bed. It started with him falling asleep on the sofa while watching television. Then he moved into the guest room, which served as his home office. I have these 6 calls with the London team, he explained, standing in the doorway and blocking me from entering. I don't want to wake you up. It is better this way. The door to that office stayed closed more often, even when he wasn't working, and the phone became his 3rd hand. I watched him from the kitchen island. He would stare at the screen, smiling a soft, private smile I had not seen directed at me in years. If I walked into the room, the phone would flip face down on the table with a practiced, synchronized thud. He would turn his back to me while typing, his shoulders hunched in a protective curve. One evening, his phone buzzed on the marble counter while he was washing his hands. The screen lit up. A notification from R.C. popped up, followed by a small, red heart emoji. I froze. Ethan dried his hands and snatched the phone up before I could say a word, his movements jerky. Who is R.C.? I asked, my voice steady despite the spike in my pulse. He laughed, a dry, nervous sound that did not reach his eyes. Oh, that is the client from the tech startup. They are incredibly needy, trying to be overly friendly to get a discount. It is annoying, really. I wanted to believe him, or rather, I was too afraid to challenge him. I began to feel less like a wife and more like a piece of furniture, a sturdy, reliable lamp that he only switched on when he needed to look like a respectable family man at company holiday parties or his parents' anniversary dinners. I tried to stop the slide. I bought tickets to a concert he used to love. I suggested a weekend getaway to the coast. I even brought up the idea of seeing a marriage counselor. He shot every attempt down with a look of pure exhaustion. You are suffocating me. Lauren, you are reading too much into things. Why are you always exaggerating everything? So I stopped asking. The night before, everything exploded. I had lain alone in our king-sized bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, through the thin drywall that separated the master bedroom from his office. I could hear him. It was a low murmur at first, and then a laugh. It was not the polite laugh he gave his clients. It was the intimate, unguarded laugh he used to give me. I lay there, gripping the sheets, listening to my husband's joy leaking through the wall. I did not know if he was talking to a client or the woman who was currently carrying the child that would destroy us. But lying there in the dark, I realized the man in the other room was a stranger, and I was just a ghost haunting the house he lived in. The first crack in the facade didn't appear with a confession. It arrived as a whisper in a crowded bar. I had stopped by a happy hour mixer that Northgate Creative was co-hosting with Ethan's agency. It was not my scene, but I wanted to show my face. I was standing near a high-top table, nursing a club soda, when I heard two junior account executives from Ethan's team giggling behind a potted palm. "Did you see Ruby today?" one whispered. Her skirt was tight, like really tight around the middle. "I know," the other replied, her voice dropping. "She is barely showing, but you don't gain weight just in your belly like that." Not that fast. My blood ran cold. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the room until they landed on them. Ethan was standing near the bar, laughing too loudly at a client's joke. And 10 feet away, Ruby stood with a group of interns. She was wearing a loose blouse, but as I watched, her hand drifted to her stomach. It was a protective, unconscious gesture. She was holding a glass of sparkling water while everyone else held wine. Ethan was avoiding her. He was avoiding her so deliberately, keeping his back to her, never making eye contact that it looked like a performance. On the ride home, the silence in the car was deafening. I could not hold it in. "Is Ruby pregnant?" I asked, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. Ethan let out a scoff that sounded more like a bark. "Oh my God, are you serious right now? You listened to that toxic office gossip." "She wasn't drinking," I said quietly, and I saw her hand. "She is on medication for a thyroid issue." "Lauren," he snapped, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. "She is gaining weight because of the pills. Do not go around spreading rumors and adding pressure to my staff. It is unprofessional, and frankly, it is beneath you." He made me feel small. He made me feel petty. I swallowed the doubt, forcing it down, but the seed was planted. 2 weeks later, I walked into the kitchen and found Ethan on a call. His back was to me, his shoulders hunched tight. "I told you to handle it quietly," he hissed into the phone, his voice vibrating with a panic I had never heard before. Do not make a scene at the office. We stick to the plan." He turned around and saw me. The color drained from his face instantly. "Who was that?" I asked. "Just a vendor." "Messing up an order," he muttered, shoving his phone into his pocket and walking past me without meeting my eyes. The disrespect was starting to feel physical, like a weight on my chest. I called my sister, Maddie. She was an ER nurse, the only person I knew who could spot a liar from 20 paces. "I think he is cheating," I whispered into the phone, huddled in my car in the driveway. "And there are rumors about a baby. Maybe I am not being supportive enough. Maybe I drove him to it." "Stop!" Maddie cut in, her voice sharp. "Stop right there. Do not dare blame yourself for his shady behavior. He is gaslighting you. Lauren, that is what this is. He is making you doubt your own eyes. Stop looking for excuses and start looking for evidence." Her words were a bucket of ice water. I hung up and sat there in the dark. I opened my phone and scrolled back through months of texts. The pattern emerged like a constellation. The vague replies. The sudden overnight trips to client sites in cities where I knew his agency had no active accounts. A few nights later, I borrowed his car to run an errand because mine was blocked in. As I reached into the glove compartment for a pen, my hand brushed against a plastic bottle. I pulled it out. Prenatal multivitamins. It was a specific brand. A brand I had seen Ruby posting about on her Instagram stories as part of a wellness partnership weeks ago. When Ethan came home, I held the bottle up. "What are these doing in your car?" He didn't even blink. The lie was ready, polished and smooth. Client samples. "We are pitching a pharmaceutical account. They gave everyone a bottle to familiarize ourselves with the branding." He took the bottle from my hand and tossed it into the trash can like it was nothing. That was the moment the last thread of trust snapped. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I wasn't his partner anymore. I was his cover story. I was the prop he needed to maintain the illusion of the respectable family man while he built a secret life with someone else. I felt a shift in my chest. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't going to ask him for the truth again. Asking just gave him a chance to lie. I was going to find the truth myself, and when I had enough of it, I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to use it to burn his little fantasy world to the ground. I started with the numbers. Numbers do not lie. Unlike husbands. For years, Ethan had insisted on managing our finances. He called it taking the burden off my shoulders. But as I logged into our joint bank account that Tuesday morning, I realized it was actually about control. I downloaded the statements for the last 12 months, the PDF files lining up on my desktop like soldiers ready for inspection. I opened the most recent one and began to cross-reference the dates with my calendar. It took less than 10 minutes to find the pattern. On the nights Ethan claimed to be mentoring late at the office, there were charges, not for office takeout or cab rides, but for the Willow Creek Women's Center. $400 for a consultation, $200 for lab work, a recurring charge for a private ultrasound clinic. I scrolled further back. The expenses became more personal, more insulting. $300 at a luxury lingerie boutique in the city center, a place I had never stepped foot in. $450 for a dinner at Le Jardin, a French bistro he told me was too pretentious for our anniversary last year. Charges for a boutique hotel in Midtown, appearing once a month like clockwork. I did not cry. I did not throw the laptop. I took screenshots. I printed every single page. I created a hidden folder on my hard drive, burying it deep within my old work archives, and named it Research Archive. To anyone else, it looked like user experience data. To me, it was ammunition. I needed more than just spending habits. I needed the context. I remembered that our shared tablet, an old iPad we usually kept in the living room for streaming music, was still logged into Ethan's work email. He had been careless, assuming I never looked at anything beyond Spotify. I opened the mail app, my fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. I found a confirmation email from an insurance provider. Subject confirmation of extended maternity care package. I clicked it open. He had purchased a supplemental policy, the kind that covers private birthing suites and doulas. But the primary beneficiary listed was not me. It was listed as undisclosed dependent. I went deeper. I set up a filter in his settings, a simple rule that would auto-forward any email from Ruby's company domain directly to a secret email address I had just created. As I sifted through the sent folder, my blood turned to ice. There was a PDF attachment in an email sent to the insurance broker. It was a financial guarantee form for the maternity loan. At the bottom of the page, right next to Ethan's signature, was another signature, Lauren Hayes. I stared at the screen, the breath trapped in my throat. It was a good forgery, but the slant on the H was wrong. He had signed my name. He had listed me as the co-sponsor for the loan. He was using my credit, my identity, to fund his mistress's pregnancy. This was no longer just a marital betrayal. This was fraud. This was a crime. My hands were surprisingly steady as I closed the email app, I went to the location services settings on the tablet. Since the device was registered under our shared Apple ID, it had access to the location history of all connected devices, including Ethan's iPhone. I pulled up the map. There was a cluster of red dots centered around his office, and another cluster around our apartment. But there was a third cluster, a dense concentration of visits to a mid-range apartment complex on the east side of Riverton. He went there 3 times a week. He was there right now. I printed the map. By noon. My dining table looked like a war room. I had stacks of paper organizing the destruction of my marriage. I took out a pack of sticky notes and began to color-code the evidence. Red notes for the affair, the hotel receipts, the dinners, the lingerie. Yellow notes for financial abuse, the drained savings, the unauthorized spending. Blue notes for the criminal acts, the insurance fraud, the forged signature, the identity theft. I sat back and looked at the mosaic of lies spread out before me. Ethan thought he was protecting himself by keeping me in the dark. He thought he was clever. You just gathered all the rope for me. Ethan, I whispered to the empty room, a cold smile touching my lips for the first time in days. He had given me everything I needed to hang him, and I was going to make sure the knot was tight. The offices of Hawthorne and Pike were located on the 33rd floor of the tallest glass tower in downtown Riverton. It was the kind of place that smelled like old leather and expensive fear. My sister Maddie had recommended Alexandra Pike with a grim warning. She is expensive, but she is ruthless. If you want a hug, go to therapy. If you want to win, go to Pike. Alexandra did not look like she gave hugs. She was a striking woman in her 50s with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and a suit that probably cost more than my first car. She sat across the mahogany table, flipping through the stack of papers I had color-coded the night before. This is thorough, Alexandra said, her eyes scanning the bank statements and the insurance emails. She paused at the loan guarantee with my forged signature, and this is a felony. He signed my name, I said, my voice steady. He made me the financial guarantor for his mistress's labor. If he defaults, the debt collectors come for me. Alexandra looked up, a glint of predatory interest in her eyes. Let's look at the prenuptial agreement. I flinched. The prenup had been a sore spot for 7 years. Ethan's parents, wealthy and suspicious of a girl from a working-class background, had insisted on it. Ethan had sworn it was just a formality to shut them up. Alexandra opened the thick document, her manicured finger tracing the lines of legal jargon. Suddenly, she stopped. A slow, terrifying smile spread across her face. Mrs. Hayes, did you read the morality clause in the addendum? Specifically the section on asset misuse. I just signed where they told me to. I admitted. Well, Alexandra said, leaning back. His parents were very thorough. They wanted to ensure that no one could drain the Miller family fortune for, and I quote, illicit purposes or the support of dependents outside the marriage. If one party uses marital assets or the other party's identity to support an affair partner, the infidelity clause triggers an immediate forfeiture of shared assets, and since he forged your signature to do it, he just voided his protection. I sat there, stunned. The document meant to keep me in my place was now the trap that would snap Ethan's neck. So, I breathed out. He can lose everything if we play this right, Alexandra said, closing the folder. He loses the apartment, the savings, and he faces insurance fraud charges. But you have to be quiet. You have to be ice cold. What do I do? Go home, she commanded. Play the role of the grieving, confused wife. Let him think you are weak. Do not confront him about the forgery yet. We need him to spend more money. We need him to dig the hole so deep he can't climb out. And absolutely no illegal hacking. Stick to the shared devices. If you break the law, we lose the high ground. We spent the next hour mapping out the strategy. I would open a separate bank account under my maiden name at a different bank. I would transfer small, Irregular amounts, $200 here, $300 there, claiming I needed a contingency fund for my freelance work. It was low enough to avoid triggering federal alerts, but steady enough to protect my liquid cash. As I stood up to leave, Alexandra removed her reading glasses. One more thing. Lauren, she said, her voice dropping lower. Don't assume the story they are telling is the truth. The mistress, Ruby, she is young. She is in a high-pressure industry. Don't get stuck playing the role of the barren wife. You are the opponent now. We will be requesting a paternity test as part of the divorce filing. Are you prepared for what that might show? I assume it is his, I said. Why else would he blow up his life? Men blow up their lives for less than reality, Alexandra said dryly. Just keep your eyes open. I walked out of the office and stepped into the glass elevator. As the doors slid shut and the city of Riverton sank away beneath me, I caught my reflection in the polished metal doors. I was wearing the same old beige sweater I had worn for years. My face looked tired, but there was something different in the eyes. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a litigant. I was a strategist. Ethan thought he was managing a crisis, but he was actually walking into a slaughter. And as the elevator hit the lobby with a soft ding, I knew exactly what I had to do next. Fate has a twisted sense of humor, but sometimes it just needs a little nudge from the corporate ladder. 2 weeks after my meeting with Alexandra, Northgate Creative signed a massive partnership deal with Ethan's agency. As the lead UX researcher, my presence was required for the kickoff meeting. Ethan, of course, had no idea I was coming. I walked into the glass-walled conference room on the 12th floor at 9 o'clock sharp. The air conditioning was humming, but the room felt suffocatingly hot the moment I stepped across the threshold. Ethan was standing at the head of the table, clicking through a slide deck. When he saw me, he froze. His hand hovered over the laptop, his mouth opening slightly like a fish gasping for air. And there she was. Ruby. She was sitting to his left, trying to make herself small in a chair that looked uncomfortable. She was wearing a loose, flowy dress that did nothing to hide the distinct curve of her belly. She looked young, terrified, and undeniably pregnant. Ethan cleared his throat, the sound scraping against the silence. Right. Everyone, let's get started, he stammered, his eyes darting between me and his team. This is Lauren Hayes. She is the UX lead from Northgate. He didn't say my wife. He didn't even say Mrs. Miller. The room nodded politely, until Greg, a senior copywriter who had attended our Christmas party 3 years in a row, let out a confused chuckle. Come on. Ethan, Greg boomed, clapping a hand on the table. You are not going to introduce your own wife better than that tough crowd today. Huh. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that sucked the oxygen out of the room. Ruby went pale, her hand flying to her throat. Ethan looked like he wanted to vanish through the floorboards. We are keeping it professional. Greg, Ethan snapped, his voice too high, too defensive. I didn't blink. I walked to the front of the room, plugged in my laptop, and smiled a sharp, weaponized smile. It is fine. Greg, I said smoothly. Ethan gets forgetful under pressure. Now, let's talk about user accessibility. I ran the meeting with surgical precision. I commanded the room. And when we got to the section on demographic targeting, I paused, letting my gaze drift deliberately to Ruby's midsection. We need to ensure the interface is intuitive, I said, locking eyes with Ethan, especially for users experiencing significant life changes. Pregnancy, for example, alters a user's cognitive load and physical comfort. We should design for that reality. Don't you think Ethan turned a shade of gray I had never seen before? Ruby looked down at her lap, trembling. When the meeting broke for a 15-minute recess, I followed Ruby into the women's restroom. She was standing at the sink, splashing cold water on her face. When she saw me in the mirror, she jumped. Lauren, Mrs. Miller, she whispered, turning around. She looked like a child caught stealing candy, but there was something else in her eyes. Confusion. I am so sorry about the awkwardness in there," Ruby stammered, wringing her hands. Ethan said, "He said you guys had talked. That you were handling this rationally." Rationally, I repeated, leaning against the tiled wall. "Yeah," she breathed out, looking relieved that I wasn't screaming. "He showed me the insurance papers. He said you signed them. He said you agreed to be a modern stepmom, that you understood he needed to take care of us, even if the marriage was evolving." My stomach churned. He had twisted my forged signature into a permission slip. He had convinced this girl that I was a willing participant in my own humiliation. "Ruby," I said, my voice low. "I didn't sign those papers." He forged my signature. Her eyes widened. "What? No," he said. He lied. I cut in. I took a step closer, looking at her terrified face. "I needed to know one thing, but I have a question for you, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer." I lowered my voice to a whisper. "Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure that baby is Ethan's?" The effect was instantaneous. Ruby flinched as if I had slapped her. Her eyes darted to the side, panic flaring hot and bright. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I have to go," she choked out. She rushed past me, pushing through the door, leaving a trail of expensive floral perfume, the same scent I had smelled on Ethan's collar for months. She didn't say yes. I stood there for a moment, processing the fear in her eyes. It wasn't the fear of a mistress caught by a wife. It was the fear of a liar caught by the truth. I walked back out into the hallway, but I didn't return to the conference room immediately. I sat on a bench near the elevators and opened my laptop. I had drafted the email days ago. It was addressed to the head of human resources at Ethan's agency. Subject: formal complaint regarding ethics violation and misuse of company funds. I attached the credit card statements showing the hotel rooms booked on company cards for personal use. I attached the log of mentoring hours that coincided with prenatal appointments. I hit send. 10 minutes later, as I was packing up my bag in the conference room, Ethan's phone rang. He looked at the screen, frowned, and answered. "Yes, this is Ethan." "Now, but I am in a client meeting." "Okay." "Okay, I am coming." He hung up, looking pale. I have to step out," he muttered to the room. "HR needs to see me. Something about a compliance audit." I zipped up my bag and slung it over my shoulder. "Don't worry, Ethan," I said, walking past him. "I can show myself out." I left the building with my head held high, but my mind was racing. I had just lit the fuse on his career, but the explosion I was most interested in was the one hiding in Ruby's silence. If that baby wasn't his, then Ethan was destroying his life for a ghost, and I was going to be there to watch it haunt him. Ethan slammed the front door so hard the frame rattled. It was 6 o'clock in the evening, hours earlier than his usual return time. He tossed his briefcase onto the sofa and loosened his tie with a violent jerk. His face flushed a mottled red. "I hope you are happy," he spat, pacing the length of the living room. HR suspended me, pending an internal investigation. They escorted me out of the building like a criminal. Lauren. Over a clerical error. Some idiot in accounting mislabeled a few expenses, and now you have blown it up into a federal case. I sat calmly in the armchair, a file folder resting on my lap. I did not flinch at his volume. "A clerical error," I asked, my voice flat. "Is that what we are calling 3 nights at the Ritz-Carlton on the corporate card, or the $2,000 in prenatal testing billed as client entertainment? I paid that back," he stammered, stopping his pacing to glare at me. I intended to pay it back. "You don't understand how the agency works. We float expenses all the time." I opened the folder and slid a paper across the coffee table. It was a printout of the internal email from his HR director, which I had intercepted. It explicitly stated that the funds were unauthorized and flagged as potential embezzlement. Stop lying. Ethan, I said, you were sloppy. And just so you know, this is only the corporate level. You really don't want to imagine what this looks like at the court level. He went silent, staring at the paper. Before he could respond, my phone buzzed. It was his mother, Judith. I answered on speakerphone. Lauren. How could you? Judith's voice cracked through the speaker, thick with tears. Ethan told me everything. He made a mistake. Yes, but that baby is my first grandchild. The grandchild you couldn't give us. You are going to destroy this family out of spite because you are jealous. Please, don't ruin my son's life over a moment of weakness. The cruelty of her words stung, but the pain was distant, muffled by my resolve. I didn't argue. I simply tapped the screen and sent her an image file. It was a high-resolution photo of the insurance document featuring the forged signature, followed by a screenshot of the morality clause in the prenuptial agreement her own husband had drafted. Judith, I said, my voice steady, your son forged my signature to secure a loan. That is a felony, and according to page 12 of the contract you made me sign, using marital assets for an affair voids his claim to the estate. I am not ruining him. You and he did that together. The line went dead silent. All I could hear was her heavy, ragged breathing before she hung up. Ethan watched the phone go dark, his bravado crumbling into desperation. He sat down on the coffee table, putting his head in his hands. Okay. Look, he said, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. We can fix this. I need you to sign a document. Just a backdated affidavit saying you knew about the insurance. Saying you authorized me to sign for you because you were busy. If you do that, the fraud charge goes away. And I swear, Lauren, I will make it up to you. We can rework the asset split. I will give you more. I looked at him, feigning a moment of hesitation. I need time to think about that. Ethan, I lied. It is a big risk. Just think fast, he pleaded. The moment he went to the shower, I forwarded the draft of his proposed affidavit directly to Alexandra. It was another nail in his coffin proof of witness tampering and attempted coercion. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Maddie. My friend in billing at St. Jude's just checked the logs. Ruby came in for a checkup yesterday. She left the father's name field blank on the admission form. If he is so involved, why is she hiding him on the legal paperwork? I stared at the text. The pieces were locking into place. The next few days were a blur of tension. The atmosphere at Ethan's agency had turned toxic. I heard through the grapevine that mandatory sexual harassment training had been scheduled for the entire staff. Ethan was a pariah, walking around the apartment with the slumped shoulders of a man whose kingdom was burning. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I closed a major project at Northgate, receiving a commendation from the VP. My success only fueled Ethan's rage. He saw my stability as an insult. On Friday night, the dam broke. He had been drinking, and he cornered me in the kitchen, his eyes bloodshot and wild. You think you are winning, he shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. You think you can just walk away with everything? I will fight you for this apartment. I will fight you for every cent. That prenup won't hold up if I prove you were emotionally abusive. I will take it all. Lauren, I have a child to support. I stopped washing the dishes and dried my hands on a towel. I turned to face him, my expression completely void of fear. Ethan, I said softly, you are betting your entire life, your reputation, and your freedom on this fight. I am fighting for my family, he yelled. Are you? I tilted my head, looking him dead in the eye. Because you are about to lose everything for a baby that you aren't even 100% sure is yours. Ethan stopped mid-shout. His mouth hung open, the color draining from his face as the question hit him like a physical blow. What? What did you say? You heard me, I said, tossing the towel onto the counter and walking past him. Ask her. Ethan, ask her why the father's name is blank on her hospital forms. Before you lose this apartment for a lie. Dr. Morales had a small office that smelled of lavender and old books. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, cold rooms of the fertility clinics I had frequented for years. For the first few sessions, I just cried. I cried for the baby I never had and for the husband I thought I knew. But by the fourth session, the tears stopped, replaced by a dull, aching clarity. You are grieving a fantasy. Lauren, Dr. Morales told me, her voice soft but firm. You are mourning a version of yourself that you thought was only valuable if it could produce a child. But you are not a broken machine. You are a woman who was manipulated. Her words became my mantra. I started taking a yoga class down the street, in the quiet of the studio, surrounded by other women, some divorced, some battling illness, some just tired. I realized I was not a special case of tragedy. I was just part of the human struggle. One Tuesday, on a whim, I drove to the local animal shelter. I walked past the rows of barking dogs until I saw him, a scruffy, three-legged terrier mix who looked as battered as I felt. I named him Rocket. Bringing him home was the first decision I had made in years that wasn't about Ethan, or a baby, or a doctor's appointment. It was just for me. While I was rebuilding my inner world, the outer world was closing in on Ethan. Alexandra called me on a rainy afternoon with news that made my stomach drop. The city has launched a task force into insurance fraud, she said, specifically targeting the provider Ethan used. They are auditing files. Your husband's file is likely to be flagged because of the inconsistencies. If they come to you, Lauren, you have a choice. You can claim ignorance and try to shield him, or you can hand over the proof of the forgery. I wrestled with it. Part of me, the part that still remembered our road trips and his laugh, felt sick at the thought of sending him to prison. I brought it up in therapy. Is it revenge? I asked Dr. Morales. Am I doing this just to hurt him? There is a difference between vengeance and justice, she replied. Revenge is throwing a brick through his window. Justice is refusing to lie to the police to cover up his crime. You are not responsible for the consequences of his actions. Lauren, you are only responsible for the truth. So, when the investigator contacted me, I did not exaggerate. I did not scream or cry. I simply slid the folder across the table. I showed them the loan documents. I pointed to the signature that wasn't mine. I confirmed I had never authorized the funds. I washed my hands of his crime. The fallout was slow and painful. Ethan's reputation at work began to rot. His commissions were slashed. Then, the final blow to his ego. Ruby resigned. The rumor mill said she left for personal reasons, but I knew she was running from the sinking ship that was Ethan Miller. He came to the apartment 3 nights later. It was almost midnight. I heard heavy pounding on the door, followed by the slur of his voice. Lauren, open the damn door. I looked through the peephole. He was a wreck. His shirt was untucked, his eyes wild, and he reeked of whiskey. I opened the door with the security chain still on. Go away. Ethan, I said. You are ruining me, he wailed, leaning his forehead against the doorframe. I lost my bonus. Ruby won't return my calls. Everyone looks at me like I am a leper. And you are in here with your dog and your yoga, and you are fine. How can you be fine? I am not fine. Ethan, I said quietly, I am healing. There is a difference. I have nothing. He sobbed, sliding down the doorframe until he was sitting on the welcome mat. Please, just tell them you signed it. Just help me one last time. I can't do this alone. I looked down at him. For the first time in months, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hate. I felt a profound, exhausting pity. He was a man who had built a house of cards and was now shocked that the wind was blowing. I can't help you, I said. You need to leave. I'm not leaving, he shouted. hitting the door with his fist. "This is my house." I closed the door and locked the deadbolt. My hands were shaking, but I picked up the phone and dialed the non-emergency line for the police. "My estranged husband is intoxicated and refusing to leave my doorstep." I told the dispatcher, "I have a pending divorce case. I feel unsafe." 20 minutes later, I watched from the window as 2 officers escorted a stumbling Ethan into a patrol car. He looked small in the back seat, defeated. Rocket trotted over and rested his head on my foot. I sat down on the sofa, burying my hands in his rough fur. The apartment was quiet. The television was playing a late-night rerun, filling the room with low, blue light. I took a deep breath. I had stripped him of his financial safety net. I had stripped him of his professional reputation. I had removed myself as his emotional crutch. But as I sat there, finding peace in the silence, I realized the most devastating blow was still to come. He was mourning the loss of his family, but he didn't know yet that the child he was crying over might not even be his. And I still had the paternity request sitting in Alexandra's briefcase, ready to be the final nail in his coffin. The final hearing for our divorce and asset division took place 4 months later. It was a gray, sleeting morning in Riverton, coinciding with the week Ruby Collins had given birth to a baby boy. The courtroom felt sterile and cold, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. Ethan sat across the aisle from me, flanked by a lawyer who looked as tired as he did. Ruby was there too, sitting in the back row with her own legal counsel, looking pale and exhausted. Ethan's legal strategy was predictable. His attorney painted a portrait of me that was almost unrecognizable. Mrs. Hayes was cold, the lawyer argued, gesturing vaguely in my direction. She was obsessed with her career. She refused to continue fertility treatments despite my client's deep desire for a family. Mr. Miller sought comfort in a moment of weakness. He never intended to hurt anyone. He simply wanted to be a father. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, my face a mask of calm. I let them finish their story. Then, Alexandra Pike stood up. She did not use adjectives. She used paper. She laid out the bank statements showing the unauthorized withdrawals. She presented the emails regarding the secret insurance policy. She displayed the loan documents with the forged signature that looked almost, but not quite, like mine. "My client is not here to discuss feelings," Alexandra said, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. "She is here to discuss fraud. But before we address the division of assets, we must address the paternity of the child in question." The state insurance investigators requested a DNA test as part of their inquiry into the loan application. Ethan stiffened. He looked at me, confusion warring with fear. He thought this was just about the money. The judge opened the sealed envelope on his bench. He adjusted his glasses, read the document, and then looked over his spectacles at Ethan. "Mr. Miller," the judge said, his voice flat. "The results indicate that the probability of you being the biological father of the child born to Ms. Collins is 0%. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. That is impossible," Ethan whispered, standing up halfway before sinking back into his chair. We were together," she said. In the back row, Ruby burst into tears. It was a jagged, ugly sound. Her lawyer stood up and quietly informed the court that during the insurance investigation, Ms. Collins had admitted the truth. The father was a high-profile client of the agency. When he refused to leave his wife, Ruby and Ethan had concocted the plan to let Ethan take the fall and the credit because they believed they could bully me into financing the child's life through the insurance fraud. Ethan turned to look at Ruby, his face draining of all color. He had destroyed his marriage, his career, and his reputation for a child that belonged to another man. Alexandra did not let the moment pass. "Your Honor," she said, "my client was not just betrayed. She was targeted. Mr. Miller attempted to defraud her into sponsoring a child he knew, or should have known, might not be his. If she had not uncovered this, she would be legally tethered to this debt for 18 years. Ethan tried to stammer a defense. I was a victim too. Ruby lied to me. I didn't know Alexandra picked up a piece of paper. Is that so? Then can you explain this email you sent to Ms. Collins 3 months ago, quote, "Don't worry about the costs. We will put Lauren's name on the guarantee. She is too weak to fight us. She will pay for our future." Ethan's mouth snapped shut. He looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading, searching for the woman who used to make him soup when he was sick. But that woman was gone. I looked back at him like he was a stranger I had passed on the street. The gavel came down with a finality that echoed in my bones. Based on the infidelity clause and the proven attempt to misuse marital assets for fraudulent purposes, the judge ruled entirely in my favor. Ethan lost his claim to the apartment. He lost his claim to our shared savings. The debt from the insurance policies was transferred solely to him and Ruby, to be settled in their upcoming criminal hearing for fraud. When the court adjourned, the room emptied quickly. Ethan sat slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. His mother, Judith, who had come to support him, hurried out the side door without looking at him, her shame palpable. Ruby was escorted out by her lawyer, still weeping. I picked up my bag and walked out of the courtroom. I stepped out of the heavy wooden doors and into the biting cold air of the Riverton afternoon. I took a deep breath. It tasted like rain and exhaust, but to me, it tasted like freedom. Ethan had told me to accept his betrayal if I wanted a peaceful life. I had accepted his challenge instead, and as I walked toward my car, I knew that the peace I felt now was the only kind that mattered, the kind I had fought for, the kind built on the brutal, beautiful truth. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts on Ethan's karma. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button so more people can hear this story.